Welcome to a new fantasy adventure on Dreamscape. In this dark tale, oppressed peasants rise up against the evil King Morlux. With courage and desperation, they fight against his overpowering shadow army. The biggest gesture you can give me is a like. If you like my stories, feel free to leave a subscription and activate the bell so you don't miss any more stories. Well then, let's dive into the story. The fight against King Morlux. Darkness settled over the land as the small band of peasants and artisans crested the hill and paused. Before them stretched the sinister army camp of the Shadow Army that King Morlux had hired to quell any spark of rebellion. Grimly, the blacksmith Goran clutched his hammer. Beside him, the farmer Trent gripped the handle of his pitchfork, while the tailor Elena drew her dagger. They knew it was an almost hopeless fight against the superior power of the evil ruler. But the whole land groaned under Morlux's cruel tyranny. His shadow warriors pillaged the villages, robbed the harvest, and kidnapped anyone who dared to resist. The measure of suffering was full. The oppressed peasants and artisans had decided to rise up.
For our families and our land,
shouted Goran grimly, raising his hammer. The others joined in, ready to fight. Then they charged down the hill toward the camp, roaring. Their numbers were small, but anger drove them on. Immediately, the alarm bells in the army camp went off. Shadow warriors poured out of the tents screaming to repel the attackers. Goran brought his hammer down on the first skull. Trent's pitchfork bored into a belly. But the dark warriors were innumerable. Arrows whizzed through the air, swords flashed. Goran saw 3 of his fellow warriors fall. Rage filled him. He would take as many enemies to their deaths as he could. More and more desperately the peasants fought. But the Shadow Army was too powerful. One by one they fell, pierced by arrows or mauled by swords. It was a hopeless battle.
Retreat!
Roared Goran at last.
Save yourselves!
With a bloody-about face, the survivors pushed back up the hill, pursued by the taunting laughter of the Shadow Warriors. They had failed. At the top, they turned once more and looked down grimly. Smoke rose from the village, which would now fall victim to the flames of the Shadow Army. Their own was lost.
We will be back,
vowed Goran with a clenched fist.
This battle is not over yet.
Then the exhausted fighters fled into the woods. They had to hide from Morlux's wrath. Deep in the woods, they finally rested. Many tears flowed for the fallen. But soon the grief gave way to grim determination. Not all resistance had been broken yet. They would fight on from the underground. In the following moons, the rebels organized many acts of sabotage against Morlux's henchmen. They destroyed bridges, set ambushes, and freed prisoners. Again and again they struck, then disappeared without a trace. King Morlux raged with fury. He had entire villages razed to the ground, but the rebels only continued to grow. Soon, an entire underground army had formed, determined to throw off the yoke. The rebellion spread like wildfire. From all parts of the country, peasants, artisans, and runaway slaves joined the rebels. They knew it was a fight to the death against Morlux's cruel tyranny. In a secret consultation among the leaders, a plan was hatched to wrest power from the tyrant once and for all. It was decided to attack and overthrow him in his own castle. Many believed that this would be a suicide mission. But the majority was hell-bent on risking everything. Better a quick death than a life in chains under Morlux's thumb. For weeks, the rebels gathered weapons and supplies for the decisive attack. Blacksmiths worked in secret on swords and armor. Women sewed flags and standards. All over the country there was feverish activity, even if it had to be done in secret from Morlux's informers. Everyone wanted to make his contribution to the overthrow of the tyrant. Finally, the day of decision arrived. From their hiding places, the fighters streamed to the tyrant's castle. With torches, pitchforks, and blacksmith's hammers, this time they were ready to go to the extreme. The sinister shadow army poured out to meet them. Again, a relentless battle raged. But the rebellion grew into a firestorm that burned everything to the ground. In the end, the gate of the castle was stormed. With grim satisfaction, Gorin saw how the rebels toppled the tyrannical King Morlux from his throne and put him in chains. That very night he was executed. His dark reign had come to an end. Cheers went up and the torches lit up the night. But in the eyes of the fighters there was deep sorrow for the losses. Far too many had fallen. But they had won freedom for the living. Now the hard work of rebuilding the country began. The Shadow Army had been crushed, but hunger and poverty were great after years of oppression. But everyone pitched in. Gorin helped rebuild the destroyed villages, his enormous strength coming in handy. Other rebels roamed the land as guards to ensure law and order. Never again should a tyrant like Morlux be able to seize power, they swore. Wise elders were elected as rulers who were committed to the people. Never again oppression. Slowly, hope returned to the hearts of the people. Seeds were sown, craftsmen built, children played laughing in the streets again. Life blossomed anew. But never should the sacrifice of the fallen be forgotten. Everywhere people remembered their brave fight against the tyrant through songs, stories, and monuments. They were the true heroes. Thus, over time, a legend of the struggle of the oppressed against the darkness was created, which was still told in late generations. And it always reminded people to stand up for freedom. Many centuries later, in a world long since pacified, the young shepherd boy Terran often sat on the hills and listened to the old stories about the rebellion against Morlux. He dreamed of being as brave and strong as the rebel heroes from the tales. He reenacted the battles with his friends in imaginative games. Then he grew older and understood that one could fight for peace and freedom not only with the sword, but also through wisdom, compassion, and justice. Thus, the ancient legend bore fruit for many generations and taught people to be mindful of each other. Only in this way could the shadow army of Morlux never rise again. And when Terran later told the story of the rebellion to his own children around the campfire, he concluded, "Be merciful and just, and you will never need to fight again."